Lawyers representing the SIU in the review application brought by Gauteng Health MEC Dr. Bandile Masuku say the attempted cover-up of the PPE scandal shows the dishonesty of all parties involved. Now, Masuku wants the SIU report, which found him to have failed in his fiduciary duties, set aside. For more on this, we speak to our senior politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo. Ziyanda, you've been following this from pretty much, earlier on.
Yes.
But central to the Bandile Masuku issue is the story of an email.
Certainly. So, I mean, earlier on we were hearing the issue of how there's an email that was sent to the then health MEC in the province, Bandile Masuku, which had a list of then the suppliers of PPE in the province. And it's this email that has been a bone of contention to prove whether or not then Masuku failed in his fiduciary duties and overseeing then the guidelines that were given by the Treasury in terms of when this procurement process became centralized. Now, what's come out then from the lawyers representing the SIU this afternoon is that they're saying, firstly, if Masuku says he didn't read that email, that in and of itself then proves that he did not behave in an according manner to ensure that things were being done properly as the political head. But furthermore, they're saying that, not only did he fail in that particular aspect, they're also raising an issue with the fact that when the scandal about Royal Bacta came out and the relationship between the Dikos and the Masukus became public knowledge, Vincent Maleka, who's representing the SIU, says what is even more scary is how the scandal was. There was a huge cover-up, an attempt to cover up, because when that's when Thandisizwe Diko then cancelled the contract through Royal Bacta, but then there were reports then that he still received payments for the purchasing of PPE through another front company called Lidla Structural Development, and that is where we are in this matter in terms of the SIU responding and proving then of Masuku's failure to do his fiduciary duties. But I must emphasize then that in this particular report, they still don't find Masuku guilty of either colluding with any of the officials in the health department or guilty of corruption by virtue of using his position as MEC to influence who the tender was awarded to.
And that's the question that I was about to ask you there. With the allegation of the cover-up, was Masuku implicated in any of that? But as you're clearly stating, he is not being implicated in that. So the main bone of contention, the focus now, is really not having opened the email.
It's really not having opened the email, but regarding that issue of the email, then Maleka hitting back on that particular aspect, saying that he gave two different versions. You remember Masuku solicited a private forensic investigator in the form of Paul O'Sullivan, who then also did his own probe into the matter, and the Maleka was raising the disparities between the two issues. But Tami, I want us to actually go back and hear what Vincent Maleka had to say regarding this issue of Masuku and how he's handled the matter.
When the scandal relating to Royal Bacta was discovered, there was an attempt to try and conceal that scandal by bringing a third party and converting the supplies it had bought into a donation. And we now know, Justice Sutherland, that it is not the fact of the revelation of scandal that produces lack of public confidence. It is the attempted cover-up of that scandal behind it thereafter, which becomes even more scandalous than the scandal itself.
Another key issue, Ziyanda, that was discussed is whether or not this actually is being heard in the right court.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So earlier on, when William Bukari, who's representing Bandile Masuku, was outlining his heads of argument, there were questions raised by some of the judges to ask whether or not although first of all they had questions around the failure of Masuku to actually seek a review of David Makura, the Gauteng Premier's decision to suspend and subsequently fire him, because the decision by Makura to fire Masuku was on the basis of the very report that he's trying to have reviewed. Now, that particular issue was ventilated, and once Mukari was giving his response, the judges also then probed to say, well, it seems as though you're speaking about reputational damage. So is this not a case that is about a defamation of Mr. Masuku? Surely then should he not be suing the SIU? But we actually have then what Mwile Mukari had to say earlier on today.
Let's listen in.
If you can demonstrate that when that organ of state did so was exercising a public power, you can come to court and the court exercises what you call judicial scrutiny. So we're challenging the findings as a primary challenge, not collateral, because the findings, they stand as an albatross on his neck for the rest of his life. And if he does not set them aside, it means that he does not have any recourse anyway. And the Constitution says that he does have a recourse, and that recourse is with the courts. So then now to come to the question posed by Justice Raulinga, that the SIU, that the Premier then may decide not to accept the findings. That is not the issue. The issue is the findings that are made by the SIU. They are findings not made by the Premier. It doesn't matter whether the Premier accepts them or not. They remain findings. They do not get erased because the Premier has refused to implement them. They will remain the findings against the applicant, and if the applicant does not do anything with them, they will continue to impugn his dignity and reputation. And that's precisely what the courts have said with the Commission of Inquiry.
So what seems to be quite key here, Ziyanda, is the fact that Bandile Masuku is not disputing his dismissal. That's not the key focus of this particular hearing, but rather he's disputing the findings of the SIU, because upon those findings, all other actions are pursuant.
Certainly, but the contradiction then, as you would have heard in Mukari's bite as well, has been raised to say, but you cannot, how are you trying to review the findings of this SIU report without trying to seek remedy from the Premier who fired you on the basis of the reports that you are saying is fundamentally flawed, is invalid and is baseless. This issue came up regarding the role of the SIU and where it falls, within which ambit of the law the SIU falls in. Judge Sutherland was asking whether or not the SIU is not behaving in the same way a policeman would, where they go and collect the evidence and have a prima facie case and then they leave it there. And this is exactly the argument that Vincent Maleka made, that the nature of the SIU's report does not necessarily mean finality in terms of the issues at play, which is why, of course, we still haven't gotten a conclusion whether or not Masuku personally influenced who the tender went to and whether or not he can be accused of corruption. And earlier on, William Mukari was saying, well, he likens the SIU to the public protector, barring the fact that, of course, the public protector is able to issue remedial action. The SIU can only, for an example, issue recommendations. And so by virtue of that, they are and their right to, well within their rights rather, to be taking the SIU to court, because the implications of leaving this report in its incorrect form, according to Masuku, has reputational damage for his career, not only as a politician, but also as a medical doctor.
Certainly long-reaching effects. So where to from here, Ziyanda, regarding this case?
So the matter is still being heard by the judges. William Mokari is now giving his response to Vincent Maleka. The judgment is likely to be reserved, and then we'll get the judgment once the full bench has concluded that particular matter. But certainly then this matter, the outcomes of this particular court judgment will have implications not just for Masuku, but for the ANC in Gauteng, and possibly the ANC across the board, given the fact that ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court is also facing a similar matter where he's also been accused of failing to provide the necessary oversight when he was still Free State Premier.
Certainly a lot hanging on this one particular ruling. Thank you so much, Ziyanda. That's our senior politics reporter there, Ziyanda Ngcobo.